First off, thank you for being here. I am Tessa Byford, founder of LIFTT, Latinos in Film, Theater, and TV, and a producer at Prodigium Pictures. My producing partner, Melody Leyva, and I organized this event because we truly believe that this conversation is very important, and it's not only important within our community, but it's important for everyone. Equity can only be accomplished if everyone comes together and we understand the issue, we talk about the issue, and then we also discuss the solutions. Just a little bit of background on LIFTT. I founded LIFTT in 2018 when I was looking for a place to have immediate access to Latinx workers in my industry. At times, being a Latina producer can feel very isolating and as if I have no access to other people who are feeling the same way that I feel. So yeah, I was almost positive that in my industry, there were other Latinos, other Latinx that were feeling the same way. So I created a group that represents inclusion. We have members of all ethnicities. We are a group that includes everyone and anyone who is creating content and promoting Latinx content. And we're very much for people in front of the camera, but then also behind the camera. We have members at executive levels who now have immediate access to working with Latinx professionals. Our group is building the bridge between seasoned professionals to up and coming talent. We believe everyone in our group deserves the opportunity to work. And I think opportunity is the key word here for LIFTT. LIFTT is all about opportunities and making sure we have access to the same things other ethnicities have access to. So yeah, again, thank you so much for being here. This is an important conversation, so I'm gonna pass it to Melody. She'll go ahead and introduce herself and she'll present some slides that show exactly why we need to be having this conversation.
Thank you, Tessa. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate the attendance of those that have registered and of course, most definitely those that have agreed to be part of this panel. And I welcome you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being part of this conversation. As Tessa had mentioned, I am Melody Ojeda Leyva. I am the Director of Membership for LIFTT, as well as Tessa's creative and producing partner. Moving in regards to what we currently see and this conversation we decided to have, it kind of stemmed, I just want to briefly mention, it kind of stemmed from the lack of Latinx representation at the Emmys, right? And we knew that everyone wanted to have a conversation about that. But while Tess and I have been discussing this for some time, we realized that, you know, the Emmys is the last part of everything. You know, it ends with them. It doesn't start with them. And where it does begin is in the creative process and all of those that are involved. So it's important for your writers' rooms and your producers and everyone in front and behind the scenes to all be inclusive. And that's where the story begins. So we wanted to have that conversation and kind of ask the hard question as to what is holding us back and what are the roadblocks that we're seeing in regards to, you know, the Latinx representation in Hollywood. And while we're focusing more so on TV today, we will be speaking briefly on film as well. And we want to also mention that we hope this to be the first of many continuous conversations, and not just for Latinx, but for all ethnicities, because, you know, representation is important and it matters. So we have a really quick presentation. We're not going to do a huge PowerPoint thing here, but we do have a presentation that was graciously done for us by one of our allies, which is the SIE Society, and we thank them for this. This presentation will also be available afterwards, so you guys can really take a good look at it. But what it is the meat behind the data and analytical information that's important. That we as a community understand that we are quickly growing and becoming the majority and no longer so much the minority, but yet that is not representative of us when we put on the TV or watch a movie, right? So we just want to show you the numbers and, you know, so you can really see what we're working with. So once Tess is available, she can go ahead and start the PowerPoint presentation. So with the Latinx community, the population in the US consists of 60 million. The US Latinx market reached 1.5 trillion in buying power in 2017. And due to increased entrepreneurship and a rising level of educational attainment, the US Latinx buying power has increased since then from 1 trillion in 2010 and is now expected to reach 1.9 trillion which is huge. And you're talking that, these are the expected numbers moving forward. In regards to cinema viewership, the Latinx reported the highest annual attendance per capita in 2019, going to the cinema on an average of 4.7 times in 2019. And you can see the comparison on that slide. You guys can get a better look at it later. A Latinx high TV viewership. So while we know we pour trillions into the industry with, regarding monetary, in a monetary view, we also provide large viewership, which we also know is very important when it comes to the studios reviewing their viewership and their numbers and knowing whether or not a show is worth keeping on or not. We are a part of that. In 2019, the Latinx community, as well as the African-American community, were overrepresented in terms of everyday TV show or movie views via mobile device. So we're on the go, but we're on the go and we're watching everything as much as we can. Yet the underrepresentation of the Latinx community in film is significant, and it's unfortunate. So 18.3% of the U.S. population is Latinx as of 2019. Out of 53,078 speaking roles, only 5.3% of them are Latinx. So while we exist and we're here, we continue to get minuscule amount of actual speaking roles in film and TV. In regards to film roles, in 2018, Latinx was 4.9% as part of this here that you see, but in 2019, it has gone up. So for you to notice that the comparison of this pie, while we are moving up in the amount of representation from 2019, the lack of representation hasn't grown much at all. But on the other side of it, we do have an increase of directors, Latinx directors, which is important and behind the scenes, but it's still not reflecting with the growth of directors in the Latinx community. It is not reflecting in regards to representation for speaking roles, even if it's like, we might be background, but that's all we're getting, right? But we're still not seeing us being represented as leads for these storytellers. The writers' rooms, we're seeing that it's moving, but not as much, and it's a small amount, but it still has grown by 18% since 2018. And so we're in the rooms, which is important, is what I mentioned earlier. So this is where it starts with the beginning of your storytelling, and the writer's room is important to have inclusivity. And the saying, as has been said, is no stories about us without us, right? So we need to ensure that even when our stories are being told, that they're being told accurately, and they should then be written by our own community. So the underrepresentation of screenwriters. Again, here you see the population in regards to it. We have all numbers and all ethnicities. We're still not being invited into the rooms. So we're there, right? So we're there, we're here, we're around, we're available. We are trying to do our best to break our way into these, into the world of Hollywood, TV, film, however you want to put it, as well as theater, but we're not being led into the room. So this is what we want to move forward with the conversation, is how do we change that? How do we have those conversations? How do we get in front of the right people to put our stories out there? And that's why we've invited this wonderful panel to join us and share their experiences with us and tell us what they're doing behind the scenes to help elevate the Latinx community. That's all you'll hear from me for the rest of this panel. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the panel.
Awesome. Thank you, Melody. All right, Ben, take it over. Oh, you're muted, Ben.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Appreciate it. We have really an all-star group here with us. Really want to get started with Alejandro Rojas. He's director of analytics at Parrot Analytics. So we definitely got the data side of here. We're going to deep dive a little bit more into his background and know-how, especially through the questions. Alejandro, do you want to go over some of your greatest hits in the meantime?
Yeah, so like a quick note on my background, like I actually produced TV shows in the past. I'm from Venezuela. I actually produced TV shows back in Venezuela. And then as a background, I actually went to grad school at MIT. There I got an MBA and also did some grad work at UC Berkeley. So I'm kind of familiar with like machine learning and like data science and all that. And at Parrot, essentially what I'm doing is combining like this knowledge of data science and data and machine learning to like, how do you convert that into insights for the industry? And that's been my focus. And it's been such an interesting ride, especially because like the whole move to streaming is giving a lot of opportunities. I think it's opening like opportunities for everybody. And one of the things that we do is actually track, you know, if like these opportunities are getting also to like the different communities that we represent. And that's like, we have some of the data that we want to share, and like, I'm excited to be part of this panel.
Excellent, excellent. And we also have Luisa Ibanez, and she is a producer, executive producer at Pro Content Media. I want to see, Luisa, do you want to share your greatest hits as well? We're going to go a little bit more deep dive into your level of expertise and everything that you do across the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello to everyone. Luis Ibanez, and I'm here in Miami, Florida, the place that we call at certain point the Hollywood Latino. I was supervising producer in the past 10 years for the most successful telenovelas and TV series that are traveling around the world. And we had to work in producing attractive packages and stories for Latinos in the United States, but also around the globe, because, you know, this is the business. So this is what I did in the past 10 years. And now I'm doing independently and also teaching here at the New York Film Academy as well.
Excellent. And of course, last but not least, we have Adel Morales. He's director and dean of Hollywood Productions and also Equality Charter Middle School. We actually have the privilege of knowing each other for many years, going all the way back to the beginning, I guess the second renaissance of content creation, I would say in the early 90s into the 2000s. So Adel, it's such a pleasure to have you. Tell us a little bit more about your background. So anybody that might not know you, just provide a little bit more.
Yeah, sure thing, Ben. It's again, yeah, thank you for having me on here, guys. So yeah, I was a filmmaker by night, school teacher by day, for a long time, and I got to a place where I didn't want to just dabble with my toes in the water, making short film after short film every year. So, you know, because the teacher money was helping pay for it, I wanted to actually try to make a feature before I died. And then, you know, I'm 70 years old thinking, oh my God, am I ever gonna make it? So then I quit my job and I got accepted to NYU Film School, graduated from there. My thesis was a feature. And it just, I wanna say in March 2020, it screened on a streaming service. So like that little chunk of information was 17 years in the making. So yeah, man, I'm happy to be a part of this, because if any of the people who are in this webinar listening think it's going to happen overnight, think again.
100%. It's always good. Yeah, it's always good to have different perspectives. And I think we are capturing here the spectrum of that pipeline of Latinx content and content creation. There's many things that we're gonna unpack, but I think let's start with since we're already discussing this on data, I love to start with Alejandro. So this question's for you. I want to approach the scale of the issue. Obviously, we heard some, you know, early numbers and statistics and data that Melody provided, and I think I'd like to unpack that a little bit more. I know that you did a report, you know, in conjunction with CAA that was discussing and representing the diversity on the screen as a contributor to success and distribution. Now, many producers like Adele and obviously Luisa have been saying this forever, right? We know because we not only do we have the data, but the anecdotal information, right? We would say it might be important for you to prioritize content made by Latinos and for Latinos, but also by Latinos for a global market. Can you tell us what that means now based on the data that we're able to present with CA? Let's talk a little bit about that Latinx, the underrepresentation and how we can power drive it.
Yeah, let me start with this, because I think the study was very interesting in the sense that we were trying to, look at the last 3 years. So starting in 2017 through 2019, we looked at all the new releases, and then we basically categorized all the new releases on TV and looking at the different platforms, right? Looking at broadcast, looking at cable, but also looking at streamers. And then like every single title that we saw that it was released, we categorized based on a diversity scale. So we saw that they had some diversity, and like we said, like, okay, this is a diverse title as opposed to a non-diverse title. So if we put that in those two buckets, like the main finding is that actually, on one hand, we see the supply. So like the amount of productions that has like diverse talent is actually increasing. So that's a good sign, right? Like from our perspective, we're seeing more opportunities for diverse talent to be, on the screen. Do you hear me? I don't know. Okay. Yeah. So on one hand, that's we see that, and that's being driven because there's a business reason to that. But we're seeing one of the things that we do is that we actually are able to capture what is the demand that a specific title has, right? We have created a system that collects anything from like a Google search to actually a download to a visualization. So now we have a way to actually measure titles that may be on different platforms, right? And it's very comprehensive. Think of this as like every single touch point that you have with a specific piece of content. We track that and we standardize that so that you can actually compare the popularity of two different titles. So with that, since we have this platform, we were able to determine that actually diverse titles are driving more demand than non-diverse titles, which is interesting because then, like, basically it's the whole point, right? Like, if you want to really get to like a broader audience, if you want to grow your business, you need to have diverse titles. And like now we have the data to prove it for like TV content as well. So I think that was like the main headline is like, look, it's like diversity is not only good, but it's also a good business. I think that's like something that we have to kind of really communicate to people, because like there's that stigma that it's like, oh no, like, it's like, it's not clear. For us, we have the data, we did the study, and it's clear, like diverse titles drive more content. Now, if we go a little bit deeper, because of course we want to understand like what happens with the Latinx representation, right? It's interesting because we see very similar data that was presented by Melody as an introduction. Yeah, there's like a big discrepancy, right? If you look at the amount of like Latinos on the screen, is like about 5% compared to like a population that is like really 18%, right? So big gap. So then, like, that makes us question, like, oh, why is this happening? It's like, what's going on? Like, we actually, one of the things that we did is like, we went back to the data, because like, when I saw that, I was like, wow, is that right? It wasn't like the big one, like the gap was so big that I was like, wait, is this data correct? So we went back and it's actually, it's like, that's the gap that it is. But what's interesting is like, if we actually look at the titles where like, they have at least one cast member that is Latinx, those titles always outperform like non-diverse titles. So again, like, it's like, it's almost like saying like, look, it's like, we have the data that proves like, having Latinx on the screen is actually a good business. So we have to kind of communicate that, because like, obviously now there's a gap. And I think, like the way to convince people to actually make changes is actually with the data on hand. And the fact that we have done this analysis, I think, is a powerful statement to move the industry forward, because like once we start measuring this, and we're going to be doing this every year, so then we can see the progress, right? And like, so it's more like, I know there's like a lot of like people who are like talking about like making change, but like here we have a way to actually see if that actually is happening. It's like, are they really keeping up to their word? Is this actually happening? Like, what is the rate that this is happening? So I think it's interesting. I mean, in general, like the main message I think that I want to communicate is like, every time you have a Latinx on screen, like you're getting like bigger audiences. So it's like, really, it's a good business, And then it's like, makes sense because like Latinx really consume a lot of media, right? So we're like prone to that. So we want to see ourselves like represented. So, it's all like, I mean, if you think about like the drivers, it all makes sense, right? And I think it's more about like really delivering that message so that this opens up opportunities for everybody. Because as the other thing that was mentioned is like now the whole business, as Luisa was saying, like the whole business is becoming more global, right? And I think now it's a big opportunity also to reaching people that speak Spanish, not only in the US but everywhere. It's like we're seeing like one of the things that actually is pretty interesting is like this year, like the show Money Heist, Casa de Papel, became like the most popular show in the world. So for the first time, like a show in Spanish was the most popular show like in the world. So like the whole world, like that's one of the things that we're able to do and we are able to measure. So for the first time, we're seeing like, it's not Game of Thrones, it's not The Walking Dead. It's actually like a show that is in Spanish, right? In Espanol. So I think that also gives us a lot of hope. I mean, from my perspective, it means like, look, it's like, there's really no limit here. If you create good content and that people want, you can like really reach like different cultures and really now, especially now that you have the ability to become global through all these like global platforms, I think it's like there's a big opportunity for like really Spanish content to really thrive. And I think a lot of opportunities for Latinx to tell the stories that they want to tell.
100%. So there's a lot to unpack there. So I want to appeal, especially on the data side of things. So for a lot of folks who are not able to afford, for example, like even the data dumps that you and data license you get from like Nielsen, Studio System, Variety Insight. There's a deeper level of this is much more sophisticated data scraping on how enthusiastic our audience is based on hashtags, just so people can peer a little bit inside that box, which is very transparent on the para-analytics side of things. A lot of folks are wondering, where's this data coming from? Right. It's coming from, you're basically aggregating this data and then applying sophisticated algorithms to get a better understanding for it, right? Yes. And then so if you actually visit their website, Para-Analytics, there's actually a breakdown of the way they're actually capturing all of this and learning to interpret it. Now, I want to make sure that we frame that. Why is that empowering for independent filmmakers like Adele or someone like Luisa? I think it kind of provides a baseline of information or where you might want to attack. The second part that's really empowering about this data analysis is that it allows filmmakers to start doing something really exciting, starting to do a little bit of predictive forecasting or where the industry might be going. And this is like peering into, obviously, that crystal ball, kind of like Walter Mercado-like, but with data. And I think that's going to be the most empowering aspect of this. Now, there are some questions already that you have about, are sales better for Latinx folks? Yes, if there's a better audience, a bigger capture of the audience, it does translate in better sales. It does translate in better. Are we hitting the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Spanish versus, English? Are we looking at, the nascent or bilingualism now traveling worldwide? So this is the things I kind of want to go into, because I know that Luisa, on the Spanish language side, there's definitely exciting data there. And I'm sure you're seeing on the excitement of people as you're having a slate that's diverse. And also on the other end with Adele, your content happens to be made very, focused on POV, but also you're not just going for the domestic US market, you're trying to capture a share, not just on the long tail aspect of it, of the world. It's like doing the reverse crossover, right? Actually, you be seen by audiences in China, in Europe, and also in Latin America, which is really exciting. So why don't we start, and thank you, Alejandro. So let's keep the thread of that, because data can be very empowering. And also what we're doing for producers right now is demystifying this aspect of it. So that way it doesn't feel weird for people. And anyway, so again, in the meantime, while you guys are listening to this chat, I highly suggest checking out Parent Analytics in the background, just so you guys can see the methodology and you guys can, it's almost like having your cheat notes. I think is very helpful. So Luisa, can we start on this aspect of Casa de Papel and going into that aspect of Spanish language being the driver on beyond the audiences, right? It's also great to be a producer, right? Is this one of the best times to be alive?
It's the best time to be a Latinx producer and Hispanic producer because right now the Latino is trending around the world. We are selling. Our Latino community around the world, and let's say around the world, we are the buyers, we are the consumers. Just think about it. The big studios are moving their offices and they are opening studios in Spain, in Mexico, in Argentina. Why? Because they are looking for this content, because this content is really traveled pretty good around the world. And it doesn't matter if it's only in Spanish, it's in Spanish and English. And it could be also because there are many projects in LA that are in English, but focus in the Hispanic market, which is very interesting. It's a particular crowd. They are producing films in English, but they are focusing in the Hispanic mindset. So I think that we could find a great formula if we understand that what we are producing or the stories that we need to tell is not only for these 60 million people that it's in the United States. We need to think globally because that's the way that the studios are thinking. You know, if I need to invest a lot of money to produce a TV series, right? 8 episodes, 10 episodes, and I don't know right now what is the average after COVID about the average of the budget for every episode. But where is the best place to produce it? Is it here? Is it in Spain? Is it in Mexico? Is it in Argentina? Because everywhere and in all these places, you could find these actors that are trending with 20 million followers, right? That they also speak English. So if we are not running with them at the same level, we could lose that opportunity because we are just thinking locally. You know, you had a great panel, I remember, with Sony Picture and the executives, Anna Vaughn and Sandra Condito. They said, we need to elevate the game. You know, we need to bring our stories more commercial. We need to think that our TV series, our films, they're not only for this audience. It's not only for these 60 people that also, they don't watch TVs, right? We need to think about that your content will be traveling from these streaming platforms everywhere in different languages. And that's what we had the opportunity to produce with Telemundo, because I think that it was it's still the main producer of Hispanic content. But in the past years, before we had the problem with the tax incentives in Florida, we were moving the way to develop the stories into a bilingual stories. And we had 2 great projects that also were nominated for the Emmys, the international Emmys, Jenny Mariposa de Barrio, because this story, it was from Jenny Rivera, and she was fully bilingual. So we brought actors from LA, from New York, from Mexico, actors who live here in Miami, and it was very organic. You know, the characters that should speak in English, and the ones who needs to speak Spanish, did in Spanish. Same with Al Otro Lado del Muro. You know, it was the story of the girl crossing the border wall, but when she's in LA, she speaks English because the whole community, you know, welcome her in English. And this is what we have to start thinking about. What makes us unique being Latinx here? You know, what is the kind of stories that we could produce here that nobody else could produce in any other place? You know, because if we are still thinking that we could produce or develop a content that it's pretty similar, like the sitcoms, the American sitcoms or novellas, you know, there are other places that you could find these projects, and probably cheaper, and from successful producers or showrunners around the world. You know, the Turkish are great doing novellas. Indians love novellas. You know, Brazil are great producers for novellas, and they are subtitling or translating the stories. So why should I need to buy novellas here, right? TV series. Okay, let's think about TV series. Money Heist, Casa de Papel, great. In Spanish, and it's not like the common Spanish, it's Spanish from Spain, which is sometimes has different, the accent is very hard sometimes also for the Hispanics. And it's the #1. And there are many other shows that are trying to move into this market. And these showrunners are also planning because, and I know because I'm in contact with them, they are planning to produce new stories here from the Hispanic mindset, but the ones who live the American dream. And this is the topic that we have here that nobody else has. We live like the American dream with all the problems that we could have, but there are millions of Latinos or Hispanic that lives in another countries that wants to be in our position, that wants to come here to go to college, or so we are very fortunate that we have great opportunities to tell unique stories that no one else can tell. Alex Pina, the showrunner of and creator of Money Heist, he just released a series. It's White Lines in English and Spanish, produced in Spain, but the package comes with actresses from Hollywood. So we can do this. We are here. We know all the agencies. We know all the actors, and we know exactly who are trending. And also we know from the Hispanic market, we know who are trending not only as actors, we know who are trending as directors, who are trending as writers. We need to build a bridge and interact everyone because we are working separate. We are in the South, we're in Miami, you are in LA, the others are in New York, and we are not connected. And this is not good because we could share formulas and we could develop probably a brand, a signature, what it means producing, what is the Latinx show? What is this about? What is our brand in order to be competitive, not only here in the world, because the studios will give us the opportunity if they know that our content will travel pretty good and will sell around the world. And that's I'm very excited because I know that there are great opportunities right now. Everybody's pitching. Also, independent producers right now are pitching TV series, documentaries, short films, everywhere in all the markets. And it's really important to be in this market and listen to the data, because the data from Power Analytics is great, not only to predict, they tell you exactly what is trending, what the studios are looking for, what the streaming platforms are looking for. It's incredible to see the joint venture between the big studios, independent producers, local TV networks, from content that it's diverse, that it's bilingual, multicultural, and they are doing great things. The Turkish are coming to Chile to develop this kind of telenovelas with them. So it's a global community. And this is the way we need to be in this global community together, working and sharing.
100%. So thank you so much for unpacking that a little bit better, especially in the Spanish language. The potential is the same thing in 2 languages where we can be that double threat, right? Multiple threat. And I think it's going to provide a lot of great opportunities. I do want to segue here just really quick, because I think it's important for a lot of folks who happen to be on the independent side of things. It's a different career path in railway when you start in Latin America versus the career path if you're a producer in Miami, because that's kind of like the center of everything, the bridge into Spain, the whole Platam strategy. But let's just say you're an independent filmmaker, right? In the Bronx or, Washington Heights, in Tucson, Arizona, and you're still trying to figure this out, right? So on one railway, let's just say the independent filmmakers that maybe got subsidized by a lot of the different ministries of cultures in their home countries. It's a completely different thing. So when I, for example, go to a film festival like Cannes or Berlin, I hardly see US-based Latinx, and by US-based, I mean like US-born, US-raised, maybe they moved their operations to the States, maybe they crossed over, they're establishing their lives and their families here and their business. it's very difficult to see those folks pitching projects at the European film market. In fact, some Europeans still get confused with that term Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, all of that. And so I do see a difference in the way that folks have evolved from Latin America versus the ones that do here. In Latin America, especially like, let's say Brazil, I believe backs you up almost 100% of your independent projects. That means that you're still got to apply to the Ministry of Culture. You're still got to apply for those incentives and all of those things. But through specific programs, almost 100% of the funds, it's subsidized by the government. And so for a US Latino like Adele, I know that the path is much different. For an Adele, and obviously I'm going to make sure that you take this on, brother, because I think it's important to frame that. There seems to be about a 30-year disconnect there as far as the people that getting a chance to pitch in global markets. And on the US side, maybe if you do make it to a film market, it might be American film market, or maybe you get to pitch at some of the Tribeca meetings, or maybe at Sundance, or maybe some of the other areas, right? But it's limited experience. So there's already like a set pipeline there. So the independent producer based in the US, born in the US, raised in the US, they're being at a competitive disadvantage for at least 30 years. Now, this data is very empowering. And I do agree that the Luisas and the Adeles are now communicating, they're talking to each other, and maybe you can start setting up co-productions. And this can be very liberating to understand the potential of that. And marrying it with the data to make sure that your decks, this is when you're presenting, you're backing it up with data. So Adele, can you set this up for us, especially your approach, right? Because you got at least 20 years of experience. You went to NYU, you went through the School of Hard Rocks, especially coming up as a gritty filmmaker. As you're hearing all of this, what is your takeaway as an independent filmmaker? And what would you say for the next generation that's coming up, especially because you're now touching the early stage of the young, the teens. You're teaching them now how to avoid the mistakes that you made. And maybe you're empowering them in a different way. How are you setting them up, and how are you applying those lessons to your own career?
All right, well, this idea of that CAA study, right? And we said it's not brand new, that filmmakers of color that I've had conversations with over time have always seen that connection between on-screen diversity and box office success. You know, before social media, you know, in the 80s and 90s, you know, you had Coming to America, Bad Boys, Juice, La Bamba, Stand and Deliver, American Me, right? We just didn't know. We knew in our communities the effect that it was having and how much we were talking about it. But it didn't. If I knew the data then, it wouldn't have had an impact on how I spent my money at the theater. Like today's kids, and I'll go into that later, but they just want what's hot. They want to see what's hot. And if it happens to be people of color in there, cool. But it's whatever the kids are going to be talking about tomorrow. But like this, if the study that CAA did, now we actually have the data, we have the proof, but we've known all along. And despite that evidence, that putting more people of color in the film is going to equate to more money in your pocket, studios are still not interested in showing our movie, telling our stories. What else could it be? And, you know, that has these studios and these executives making such poor business decisions as the data suggests. And you know, I don't want to sour the mood, but you know, I put my money on racism and prejudice if I was going to place a bet. And you know, although I agree with needing to get more, you know, globally get other people involved, and I like your idea about, you know, teaming up with foreign folks, international folks to get some of that money. Being here in America, in New York specifically, the Bronx, I've had to find a way to make my movies with my own money because no one is giving me money. No matter how dope my story is. This film that I just did that I got distributed by UMC, co-release, I purposely set out to try to make a controversial film that I was hoping would be attractive to the European market, because it was about a topic that you find in mostly European films. It had a parent-child romantic, confusion situation going on, right? So this is not a topic of incest, is not something that gets touched in America too long, but Europeans, I found a whole bunch of movies that I did my research on. And so I was banking on, I was trying to do a strategic move in that it could possibly get picked up on one of these international festivals. And it didn't. It had its world premiere at Urban World, New York City, which is fresh to a sold out theater. So I was actively trying to use whatever bits of information and data I knew to try to proactively get my stuff seen by more people. It still didn't happen. So I know how to use data, and I know that it's important. I just don't let it factor into many of the moves I make. Like the data that we all seen on the screen, 3% here, 7%, 0.7% here. Like, yeah, I know I got an uphill battle. I know that all my kids that I've taught in the Bronx, kids of color, have an uphill battle. We're not even talking about film, right? Just an uphill battle from being a person of color in America. So, like, I don't let the data, even though it does look nice and it's trending in the right direction, I don't let it affect any move that I make. I get my story to a place where it's hot, where you can't stop turning the page. You got somewhere to go, and you're still turning the page. And then that's when I decide to shoot that movie with my own money, with my credit cards, with my personal loans. So you were talking about how do I help the next generation kind of understand. In my daily teachings, with dealings with the kids, as a dean, most of my work comes with getting them to see those pitfalls and potholes that are out there, getting them to understand where the systemic racism is, and how they could already be playing a part in it. And so eventually it can get into film, where I show them movies in Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month. I do that kind of thing with them. And I'm always talking to them about what I'm doing with my films in terms of every night I'm writing or I'm editing or I'm doing something. So my students are always asking me questions about my passion. And that's the other thing that I hope I'm giving them, is this understanding that your passion, you don't get to pick your passion. Your passion is going to pick you. And that's the thing that you have to do no matter what. And in the end, as long as you get to do that thing, then you're a success. You know what I mean? I don't know if I answered the question, but
no, you did. I think it's important to. I think we have a lot of passion, right? And our people, we're driven by passion, heart, familia, all these really great things that make us who we are. And you have a very specific POV. So I really appreciate your perspective, because I think a lot of independent filmmakers have been going through what you've experienced. And I'm glad that you're helping to demystify. So what I've seen over the years, for example, I think I've overseen several film markets. For example, I used to coordinate, this is way before I was ED of NALIP. I coordinated the Latino media market, and I oversaw an average of 300 to 400, actually at a highest point, 400 to 450 meetings in 48 hours. So our job was to match content creators with content buyers. And one of the number one things that we hit was, why are certain distributors not coming back to this film market? And I had to analyze data from way back in the day when this film market started. And so one of the areas where I noticed that a major DTC giant, now that became a DTC giant, was present at one of our media markets back in the day. This is before I took over. And I remember seeing that specific Could have been maybe last names around us. I don't know. I can't confirm or deny. But the fact that this person attended a market, but they didn't come back to this market. Why? Because I needed to dig up things. I had to go through the analog system of a dusty file. And I found that the projects that he was set up with, or this person was set up with, they were not 100% vetted. There were some issues in the vetting process. And so it's all about first impressions, right? And the way you pitch and the data and the way you package things. So it took NALIP as an organization, by the way, the National Association of Latino Independent Producers, to get that credibility back almost 10 years later to bring back that specific DTC into the conversation. So I think it's important for us to look at this whole area of data. So Luisa, I'm glad that we're cooking and talking about markets, because I know that you're very experienced when it comes to markets, when it comes to grabbing that data, marrying it with a pitch. Mm-hmm. What does that look like when you're now not just pitching here at the local domestic level, but also internationally, especially with POV stories that are authentic coming in maybe from the Bronx, mm-hmm. that type of setup?
Yeah, what I've learned in the past 3 years, because the market is changing a lot, is something that I'm also teaching at the New York Film Academy to the film students. We need to build our own audience. If we are independent, we need to prove who we are, what we tell, what is the best way that we have to tell our story, why we are unique, what is our difference, what is our signature in the market, right? So it's true that we are looking for, to produce features, we have great stories, but the problem is there are millions of people in the same position as we are. And the way to open the door, it's maybe not producing the whole feature, and maybe don't wasting our, money from our pocket or, our credit cards. It's bringing in through the community to produce a short film, like a trailer, like the test, something that we need to test. How is our story about, right? And then start pitching. And it's not only pitching in the film markets. We also have the opportunity to pitch at NACP, that is for television, and now it's open. We have the opportunity to go through Conectados, that it's online right now because of the situation. And you could find also partners or financiers there that are looking for Latinx content around the world. It's not only because this is Spanish, there is Ventana Sur. There are a lot of markets. NALIP, it's a great opportunity that we have here in the United States. So yeah, it's approaching. It's true that sometimes the investors are not there, but it's from our passion is what we need to start looking for the right people to attach in our project, to start working in our own packages. It's not only that it's a great story. What are the ingredients of this beautiful cake, right? Who are attaching in this beautiful cake that we're going to offer in the market, because we have a lot of great opportunities there. So why a studio or an independent production company could look at my project and say, this is interesting. Let's go forward and let's talk, So working in a very professional way, yes. Working in our business plans, yes. But most important right now, it's building our own audience. We could see that the young generation is great. They are influencers. They are posting stories on Twitter, on Snapchat, on TikTok, and they are great. And they are building audience with their own content. Pretty simple. They don't need the camera, the 4K camera. They don't need, all the elements that we think that it's needed. But they are proven that they can tell stories that are very attractive. And they have millions of followers over there. And then is when they are moving into the professional way. Okay, now that I have the audience, let's negotiate. Let's see how we could do things together, right? Yep. So I'm very positive right now that, again, we need to be connected with all these great people that are producing content in different ways, in the professional way for filmmaking, in the professional way from TV, but also with these storytellers that are everywhere, that are trending, that are in our neighborhood, in our community, in our house, probably, that they are doing great things and they have followers, understand what they are telling, why they are building this audience, what people around the world are liking, are trending, are following, are asking for more content. and then moving into the professional way. This is one thing. And the other thing is we need to be part as producers. We need to be part of the markets. We have to, we have to attend at the important markets that are available, especially for TV producers right now. People is there, people is able to listen. They are not closed doors. And also, I would like to say that it's true that we don't have enough representation in Hollywood, but we do have great Latinx executives in the industry, especially when it's focused in the Hispanic or Latino market. Viacom has great ones. I know that Ben, most of them, and the Moshine. They have people like we are here, we are talking, and they are working in Sony Pictures, in Warner. They are there. Probably they are just focused right now in building this sales or increasing their sales in the Hispanic market, but they are here and they could give us advice, and they could give us exactly where is the best route to organize our stories and move our stories for here and also there. So I think that our executives are right in the Latinx that are in the industry are getting better positions for taking decisions in the industry like never before. And we have to be in contact with them to give some mentorship from them. I know that they are busy because they are very, very busy, but I'm sure that most of them will be more than happy at a certain point to, open conversations like this one and talking and being honest. And as Ben said, they open fire, and try to realize, okay, what's realistic in the market? Are we doing the great things or not? I would like to share just a small slides about what is our behavior in terms of ratings here in United States. And I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's.
While you're setting up, is it possible to provide a little bit of context really quick while you're setting up that? And then obviously Melody can probably help.
The idea is to understand that, for example, what is the average of the ratings that Latinx content is doing here in the national TV? 2 million, 1 million viewers, from the perspective that we are 60 million, right? And it's not something that to point against someone. No, it's to understand that our message is not engaging our own people. Back at the beginning of the 20s, we have George Lopez, right? And it was our big show, 11 million viewers. We had Ugly Betty, right? 10 million viewers. What happened? What happened with our content? What happened with these opportunities? And Ugly Betty comes from a telenovela. Jane the Virgin comes from a telenovela from Venezuela, and all these people, all these writers are available, and they are still writing great stories that fit perfectly in our audience. But we are looking for maybe, we are just in the process to find the right answer, or what is the best content here that will be successful. And this is like, we are in this tryout, and it's very interesting because when I was working in this small presentation, I was trying to understand, okay, here, I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on here.
So why don't we do this, Luisa? While you're getting set up with a presentation, I want to provide a little bit of context here. And also, I did have a couple more questions for Alejandro. So,
sure.
And then I'll go and head back to you to be able to present those numbers. So there's a little bit to unpack here. It's a lot of stuff. I mean, this is, out of this session, I think what we're going to create is more questions. We're going to be able to address and how to unpack this whole issue of what is the future of Latinx representation, but also what we want to do. Hopefully that's one of the goals that we can agree on. We want to empower the audience. We want to empower folks to see that there's a brighter future ahead for us, and that there's actually a toolkit, a lot of resources to draw upon. And one of them primarily is data. And so let's go back a little bit to that. That's because it's super, super important. When it comes to data, I think one of the chicken or the egg, the challenges, the catch-22 is, how do you provide comps, comparatives? How do you provide comparative data on something that Adele hasn't shot yet, right? Because he might be pitching a coming of age story in the Bronx. What are the comps that he has? He's gonna have to figure out.
I got an urban Latino story called La Santera that I pitched to Rosario Dawson in the elevator of NYU while I was taking her to Spike Lee's class. And she said, yo, you get the money, I'm down. Okay. And I've taken that script. That script got into the second round of Sundance. Right. That script, you know, and still nothing. So yeah, I
want to unpack that a little bit. Yeah, so that comes because, by the way, it's not just LA and Hollywood, the land of maybes. I always say is the land of maybes, because nobody ever wants to say no to anybody, just in case you eventually make it, Adele. Just so you know, it's not just the Rosario Dawsons of the world. We love her, we appreciate her, but I don't want to unpack that yet because we're still gotta go.
I'm talking about the people that I told about this.
Right, but what I'm saying is that there's a way to structure that in a way that it becomes a compelling package. But let's first go back to that specific area of comps. Without having your comps and being able to present it in a professional package, right? Most people in Hollywood or in the other industries, they're gonna say, it's hard for me to approve this because I still gotta take it to my boss and my boss's boss. And by the end of the day, because we're undergoing a very tectonic shift in the industry, especially the shift to DTC, the shift obviously with COVID, the loss of the theater experience and so on. So this is where I wanna go back to Alejandro to bring us a little bit back to that baseline of, yes, you have at least 20, 30 years of data that you're now looking at the best way to interpret it and empower the producers, the executives, the agents. So you're grabbing the same data many times, but interpreting and presenting it in specific ways, right? Because at the end of the day, Latinos are a good investment. Our purchasing power is at the $2 trillion level on the domestic side. But I'm sure that on the entertainment consumption aspect of it, we know that we over-index. Latinos are what? They were 25% pre-COVID times, right? Just so that way we can get some baseline numbers. 25% pre-COVID of the box office, combined with Asians and African Americans, we're basically 50% of the box office. That's nothing to sneeze at. Now, because of the shift to DTC, can you go a little bit deeper? And if it's okay to do a little bit of predictive forecasting, especially, I know that you guys are trying to run numbers on what's gonna happen where people are staying away from the theaters, they're staying home a little bit longer. And if you don't mind grabbing a little bit piece of what Luisa has been discussing, why is it about Latino audiences that they're not sometimes supporting Latino stories, perhaps in their viewing habits? Because somehow Latinos love consuming a lot of general market stuff by the studios. But yet when it comes to an indie story like Adele's or Luisa's, or maybe a telenovela adaptation, they're not quite as excited or they're not tuning in. What's going on there? What are we missing? I know I'm throwing a lot at you, Alejandro. So
no. Those are all great questions. I just want to address a couple of things because I thought like the discussion has been like very, very rich in terms of like the different perspectives that everybody's like providing. And I want to touch on like Adele's passion point, because I think that's like completely like, that's like the key to everything, right? So even though like my perspective is more from a, like we collect data and we look at things like very methodically, very like analytically, I think at the end of the day, you have to start with passion, okay? Because that's what's gonna drive the project. What I do think data could be useful is more like in terms of like, how do you channel that passion and how do you make tweaks? Because the story is a story, right? Like you wanna tell your story, but like then like how you market that, what are the things that you actually tweak so that at the end of the day, you get to where you want to get? Because I mean, a lot of people are trying to get there, right? So any little advantage, it's gonna differentiate yourself. So it goes back to the idea of like, okay, what makes us different, and how can we basically highlight that so that we get to like really make the difference? And that's where I see the data making a difference, because like, and I want to bring to your, I guess, attention, a term that it was actually coined by this guy, like the guy who runs all data for CAA. And we were in a panel just like a few weeks ago, and he talked about like having augmented intuition, which I thought it was like, I mean, it's such a great term, because like, it's not like data is replacing intuition, like by no means. I mean, it's like, that's, you know, and I think what data is saying is giving you is like a wider perspective of what you have. So Adele was talking about like, oh, like I look at these like European movies that have like this plot or whatever. Yeah, that's great. And that's like actually data, right? And like, and what if we actually go one level deeper than that, right? So, because like those are the movies that you were like, that you basically identified, but now we have the capability of actually tracking. I mean, not 100 movies, like thousands, right? So now we're gonna be able to tell you, look, it's like there's all these other comps that maybe you didn't think about, but this could be useful references. And also it goes to a level that it goes beyond like the typical, just saying like, you know, like only the plot. We can actually go into like, what is it, the emotion that this movie is delivering, you know? So think about that, because like at the end of the day, one of the things that we've been working, which is like, it's very interesting work, is like, imagine transforming every piece of content into its content genome. We call it the content genome. And what it is like, imagine like, you know, like each of us have like a DNA, right? And the DNA basically determines who you are, how you look like, okay? If we take that analogy to content, essentially you can use like all these different elements that a show may have or a movie may have, transform that into data, right? So think of that as like, those are like the genes of the movie or of the show. So then like the comparables is no longer about like, oh, like this movie is the same genre or it has the same location. You can go a lot deeper than that, and you can find like parallels between the stories in like specific elements of more like the psychological side, or like the emotional side, or the mood side, or the theme side. So basically it really opens up like your possibilities, and the possibilities to actually connect your piece of content to other piece of content. Because at the end of the day, yeah, it goes back to the idea of like, okay, we're trying to predict success. We're trying to make something successful. And really like, it goes back to how do we increase the chance of being successful, you know? And Lisa was saying like, oh, we're not able to get our own people. Okay, so how do we, what is it that those people are watching? Why are they getting engaged with other stuff? You know, it may be that, I mean, we tend to think like, oh, if we talk about like, maybe we have like some, like the movie or the show is in Spanish, that's enough, because like then people may speak Spanish and English, but that's not, I mean, that may be just an element. I mean, like people may not care about that. They're looking at other stuff. I mean, we've done studies, like especially for Latinx, and it's very interesting. Like one of the things that happens in here is like, they actually prefer like content in English than Spanish, for example, you know, so that's something that came out of the study. And then if you go deeper, and these are people that have like very diverse, you know, preferences. But then like you start to understand like, oh, like there's certain preferences for like dramas that have some sort of like family drama involved, you know. So then you go deeper and you're like, oh, so it's like family dramas, and then like they always like some type of like rivalry. So like if there's a rivalry that kind of engages them. So I mean, I think, and I'm just describing like the process, right? Like we're going from like a very like, I guess like top level to very down. And I think doing that analysis, and again, it's never going to replace the creativity, but I think doing that analysis, essentially, it just gives you, it broadens the horizon of the type of possibilities that you're thinking about, right? So it enriches the creative process, because in a way, you know, it kind of gives you a perspective that is wider than what you had. So you go through that process. Maybe again, like going back to Adele's references, like maybe you watch like, you had like 100 movies that you thought were references, but if you go through this analysis, then you realize like, oh, there's all this other stuff, yeah. You know, and how do I capture the best of that so that my project becomes like even better, you know? So every little thing that makes it better, then increases the chance of like really making it to like being like, contracted or like commissioned. So I think that's the point of like how the data can play a role in here, and it's more about like, how do we enrich the process? And of course, it's not, I mean, like a lot of this is also, we have to be cognizant that a lot of this is new, right? So like the study that we were talking about was just released like a couple of weeks ago. All of these technologies have been like evolving over time, and like I think it's all about like the industry is transforming itself, and now we have that capability, and it's all about like, how do we really make sure that we take advantage of everything that is out there, and it's a very interesting time. So, and I agree with Lisa, this is the best time to be a producer, because also it gives you have that to kind of also like to be empowered, to actually enrich that experience that you have, because everything that we do is based on our experience, but now you have a way to also expand that horizon in a way that has never been done before. So I think that's a great thing about us. I'm gonna turn on the lights.
It's the what we call like the first mover advantage, right? I think it's good to start treating data as another kit of filmmaking, producing. And so, well, Alejandro, while you're making that transition, I wanted to also ask you another really quick question regarding the user. So, for example, the actual consumer, the actual audience itself. The way most of this DTC, direct to consumer, platforms and solutions, including your phone, right? They're collecting a high amount of data on, second by second, minute by minute, and then you create so much data in the history of you just being online. And
Right.
so let's just say you go, whether it's Amazon, to the Netflixes, to the HBO Maxes of the world, they're keeping track of what you're watching, how long you're watching it, the way they're constantly beta testing, whether you click on one certain poster, that's why it changes. The same screen that you look at in your home Netflix experience is not the same that Luisa's is. And so you're kind of training an algorithm. Every time that you decide to click on a telenovela, well, guess what? More telenovelas will be recommended. If you like, let's say anime, is gonna recommend anime, not just anime that's in its native language, but also subtitled or dubbed and so on and so on. So what happens, certain people's Netflix's or DTC's experiences all mixed because maybe one person is sharing the account with multiple people in the family. So that I'm sure drives the algorithm insane. But when it comes to individual, accounts, I did notice that most people were not seeing that movie, I Am No Longer Here, Yo No Estoy Aquí, it was nominated by the Arieles, right? The reason why I think something happened dramatically here in the US was that because the storytelling took place in the US, some of it, at least half of that movie, there was something that they did on the back end of the algorithm where there was a human element to it, where someone actually thought, hey, maybe we should tag it because maybe US audiences might actually enjoy that content, not just Latin American audiences. Mm-hmm. And so the moment that happened, guess what? More people in the US were able to see that. So I think there's also a lot of that. So I was wondering if you can dissect that really quick, Alejandro, if you don't mind. The fact that you're training an algorithm onto your taste, and then two, the fact that there's also a human element on the DTC or those companies and the studios that are making that choice for you as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's interesting because I essentially, like, you see both things happening, right? On one end, it's all about what like the machine is trying to predict. On the other end, like there's also some other like, I guess, like interventions, right? So, and like the two things are competing. My perspective on that is like, when you think about content and you think about like the complexity of content, really like a lot of these algorithms in practical terms, they're terrible at predicting what you like. And that's what, yeah, it's true. I mean, it's like, it's like, even the best algorithm, it's like that it's just such a hard problem, and it's like, of course, like they will get it right every now and then, but it's not, I mean, it's hard, it's a hard problem. And that's why a lot of times like interventions happen, because like, what you're trying to do is like, you're trying to kind of correct things that you think may make sense, so that's why, like, so that you put it in context, basically. So that's really like how all of this kind of turns out. But that's to say that it goes back to the idea of like, yes, I mean, like the algorithms like are really learning and are really doing a lot of stuff, but like content is very complex. I mean, content is something that is not, it's not as simple as like, I mean, when you compare, like, especially algorithms that are being used across all different industries, right? Like, there are algorithms that try to detect fraud, for example. And that's like a much more simpler problem, you know, because like there's a lot of like things that you cannot predict on that. But when you're talking about content, I mean, like there's so many elements in there. There's like the complexity of the product is so much because it goes back to the storytelling, it goes back to the actors, it goes back to how was the production. So there's a lot of stuff. You know, I was telling you about the content genome, which we collect. I mean, even with that, I mean, it's obviously a good reference, but it's never going to replace like all the dimensions that you have in a content piece. And again, like that's when like the art comes into here, and that's when like, you know, storytellers, you know, basically are who they are, and they're never going to be replaced by any machine. You know, it's like at the end of the day, it's like, you know, all that the machine can do is just tell you, process the data, and tells you, look, this is what we see that is similar to what you're doing, you know, and then based on that kind of give you a reference. But at the end of the day, you know, I think where like you can find like really good opportunities is when you're trying to do things that have never been done before, you know?
Right.
You know? So I think that's where like, and the machine will never tell you, or will never do that for sure, you know?
Right. So that's where we're losing a little bit of that pipeline, right? Because Adele stories or independent filmmakers, they don't have the comps. They struggle many years to try to get their content to eventually be bought by those distributors and those folks to put it online. So Adele might be at a disadvantage on the data side, but also the pipeline side. So there's multiple forces that might feel like it's against the independent producer. So I want to get back really quick to Luisa really quick before I do. I also want to preface that there's a few questions that we're going to be trying to address. Everything from, is there independent companies that specialize in buying specific content that happens to be Latinx and made by Latinx? There's also questions about the pipeline for the award season. So we're going to try to get to those, but have a little patience. We're going to go through a couple of slides. And then Luisa, if you don't, let's make sure we build enough time to be able to bring it all home. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
No, it's just that with this slide, what I just want to bring into a reflection for everybody. You know, we have to think about, you know, not in this panel, maybe at home, and I would love to share this presentation as well with all the attendants. It's that right now, all the shows that we have, you know, we are not given the numbers that the studios need. We are not given. After Ugly Betty, we are not given the numbers. Not only for, if you could see here, those are projects that were before telenovelas in Hispanic and then came into the United States and turned into English. And these are the same numbers. And it's funny because, interesting here, because the Hispanic stories that were produced here in United States territory for the Latino community in Spanish speaking, the numbers are almost the same. So it seems like our audience, being Hispanic or Latino, are no more than 2 million. It's barely 3 million, no more than this. So what happened with all these stories that are coming? You know, I'm going to share the presentation. So if you would like to see, these are trending right now. And I know that Alejandro knows better what are the reaction from these stories in the market, in the global market. Because what I feel is like Gentify, for example, is working really good outside the United States. And we need to understand what are the elements that all these stories has, right? And
actually, okay, can you go back to that slide, Luisa, really quick? Because sure, there's something to go in there, really. I think Alejandro can contribute to this. And also, it might be interesting for Adele to see the stories that he's creating, right? So based on the data that I saw released by the CA report, I did see that Mayans MC really got people on the global level excited about this, right? So Alejandro, if you don't mind going into that. And also, if you don't mind, maybe not quite confirming, but also go a little bit into Gentify when it comes to like very niche, specialized POV, authentic stories coming in from a specific perspective, in this case, from Boyle Heights. So I'm just wondering if you can, and then obviously, Luisa, let's go back and forth here, because I really want to at least like have the audience kind of get a quick look at Mayans MC, the way people are consuming it globally and versus domestically.
Those are like very good examples, and I'm going to illustrate that to the way we look at this, right? On one end, we look at always like the popularity that a show may have, right? And that basically combines all of these signals that we have, right? So a show like Mayans is actually quite popular. And not only in the US, it's like everywhere, you know, we're seeing like high demand. But then on the other hand, we also measure what is the affinity that a show may have with another show, okay? And the advantage of that is that actually tells you if you're going after a specific audience, is that audience interested in that, you know? And for that metric, which is different, I mean, we're talking about two different things. One thing is like, is this like a show that is more mainstream that could be popular no matter where? Or is this a show that could be more like attractive under a certain, like for a certain type of like population, right? Or a certain type of audience. We have a way to actually measure both, right? And sometimes you may want to go for something that just have like higher affinity to a specific audience that you're going after. And like I think Gentrified actually does that, you know? So it really depends, you know, like not every show has to be like a super hit. I mean, not every show has to be like for everybody. I think at the end of the day, what you have to figure out is like, again, going back to what Lisa was saying, it's like, what is your differentiator? You know, who's your audience? Who's your ultimate audience? What data can do is actually help you put that in a map, right? And then like you can visualize and be like, oh, look at all this content. And then I see, do I want to be here or do I want to be here? Do I want to look like more like a Identify or do I want to look more like Mayans? You know, at the end of the day, it's all about like making those decisions. And again, like you can like the story in itself, you know, it's like something that you can obtain because that's the story that you want to tell, right? So really like you have to be true to what you want to say, but then like the tweaks and how you execute that is what's going to make you maybe move into one direction or the other direction. And that's why it's interesting to put it into that perspective, right? Like looking at, okay, do I want to be popular or do I really want to just have like high affinity to this audience that I care about? Those are the decisions that you have to make, you know, as a producer. Yeah. And those are like, actually, by the way, that like when you're looking at executives, they're kind of looking at the you know, like content in that perspective too. You know, there may be some content that is like, oh no, this content is to attract new users because I want like this new audience that I don't have. Or no, this content is because I want to retain the audience I already have. You know, so always keep also, that's also another thing to kind of keep in mind, you know, like when you're trying to sell your project, it's like, if you try to kind of like understand the other side is thinking from that perspective, especially when we're talking about DTC, right? DTC is subscribers. Okay, do I get more subscribers because of this? Or do I get to like retain the subscribers that I have? So keep that in mind. And then like every project would kind of, as I said, like would be in some sort of map and would fall into, in each of like list of two variables, they're gonna fall somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think it's really important. So thank you for saying that. By the way, there's another wrinkle that we're not gonna have time to get into, but it's important to know. It is, do audiences and their enthusiasm for a show and the way they click with their fingers, they basically vote with their fingers and their attention. It's different from the type of films that get on the tomato meter based on the Metacritics, the entertainment film journalists and film critics, they might rank it in a different way than audiences. So it might be a popular hit with audiences, but yet it might be completely different in the way those film critics are capturing it. So you might get a different treatment on a, let's just say you go to Sundance or any other independent film festival, it might be 100% different. So that's another thing that might be dissected separately. But I think it's important for people to know when you're pitching this to executives, sometimes they're not thinking about the film criticism aspect. They're thinking about, are my audiences going to watch before I buy this? I want to have some sort of numbers. So Luisa, can you contextualize that as well?
Yeah, definitely. As you could see in all these presentations, what we have is that the demand of Hispanic content that our stories are demanding in the market. It's coming mostly from other places. It's coming also from, as Narcos, for example, you know, it's a production, American production, produced in Colombia, bilingual. But it's in the, I think that it's in the top 10, right, Alejandro? If I'm not, correct me please if I'm not okay, right, with Narcos. Narcos is traveling great. Not only it's trending right now, it's coming from years. And it's really important to understand this because we could create these stories here. We could move these stories into the audience. What is happening with Money Heist? The same. LIFTT is another project that is growing really, really fast here with a Latinx audience. So we have to think about these kind of stories that we could launch into the market, right? And it's about all these stories that are coming from Spain. And most important, their budgets for these stories are increasingly huge. I want to share with you where it is. Narcos, the season was 25 million. I know that, and I compare exactly the budget for season and the budget for episode, right? We have with Game of Thrones, the episode is 60 million, The Morning Show 15 million, Mandalorian 12, and The Orange is the New Black 4 million per episode. But here in our reality, in the Hispanic and Latinx market, because at the end, it's globally, you know, the budgets are increasing and the studios are able to invest the money, which is something really important. It's not that they don't want to invest the money. They want to put the money where it's really profitable to put the money. Hernan, that it's an Amazon exclusive original series, the season is $14 million right now. It's one of the best premieres that is coming. Inés del Alma Mía, same. El Cid, same. So the money is there. The opportunities to produce is there, but we need to understand what are we bringing into the market as a Latinx community.
I want to come in there really quick because there might be some folks in the audience who might be thinking, well, it's there for specifically a segment of the population that to be, you know, Spaniard, you know, super elite at that level. They already are pre-vetted. They're already being established. They already have like, you know, budgets at that level because they got a chance to not only produce that for many years, but they were given that privilege, right? Obviously, they have to fight for it. What happens to the independent filmmaker? Because remember, we're looking at, and obviously Luisa's is a very specific market that she's aiming. But what, again, this is where sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between the indie side and the folks that are coming from Latin America versus the US side. So let's make sure we are able to at least make sure that the audience understands there is no one silver bullet. This is different approaches. This is different ways of doing it, because it might take the future, you know, like the kids that you're teaching right now, Adele, it might be easier for them coming up, but yet their experience, they're about 20 years behind when it comes to this pipeline of and ways of pitching at the networks and the studios. They might not be afforded the same opportunities. And I think it's important to note that. And this is beyond going through systemic racism and everything else. I think it's really going to the understanding of how this works in a way that can be empowering. So looking at the, if you don't mind, let's talk about the future, because a lot of times, because I want to make sure that we're coming towards the end of this time, and I wanted to make sure that we're able to at least have some takeaways, right? And so we'll start with this one. Data, I think everybody kind of hopefully got it. And if you don't got it, you can deep dive into the parent analytics, but also a lot of the reports. There's also the 2014 Latino Media Gap report made by Dr. Francis Negron Montaner out of Colombia. There's the 2019 report on motion, Latinos in Motion Pictures, that was co-presented by NALIP, co-authored by NALIP, that came out with USC and the Annenberg Institute. And recently, UCLA had a report, the second part of a Latinos in Television, that came out. You're probably wondering, do I need to become an expert on all these reports? Not necessarily. What I would do is make sure that you have someone in your team that's able, and someone it could be an intern, it could be a volunteer, it could be someone that helps to start understanding what this stuff means and how you can add it to your decks and how you can bring it up in your pitch meetings in a way to really bring your legs to your package, right? And your slate. So there's a few questions that I don't think we got to, which is what is the difference because we're kind of jumping all over the place on content, right? There's the motion picture side that people think about, which is the motion picture experience and how you achieve the excellence and the awards. That pipeline, I'll cover it very quickly. There's a lot of folks that might not know the festivals that actually get you nominated for Oscars. First of all, I ask here this questions for independent filmmakers: which film festival will get me Oscar qualified? A lot of folks will go on Film Freeway and they will apply randomly to a bunch of different festivals, maybe the most established like Sundance, South by, and some of those. But then when it comes to shorts, some independent filmmakers, they don't know which ones are Oscar qualified type of film festivals. And I think it's very important to understand, this is where data keeps coming back. It's, by the way, every time that we say data, we're gonna take a shot of something because it's going to be the theme of this conversation, okay? So data, are you guys ready? Let's take a shot, okay. So if we are grabbing this information, there you go. I know para-analytics is gonna be blasted at this point, but anyway, so check this out. I think what's important is that pipeline for Oscar nominated, for award-winning, for people who cover that festival, it's an area where Latinos still haven't gotten into that next level. What do I mean by that? The Cuarones, Iñárritus, and obviously Del Toros of the world, they've went through that pipeline already. Remember, through IMCINE and their own home countries, they were able to be promoted and boosted, and eventually they experienced all the success that they had coming to them. It was great. But for the next Latino, let's say Cuaron, coming in from Islos, or a Dominicano that lives in Miami, that's a different pipeline. By the time that person gets into the film festival, it's gonna be, again, 30 years of competitive disadvantage. They're gonna have to make up for it by using, are you guys ready? Data. That's one of them. All right. Second part of it, your slate and your team has to be brought in the best of the best, because you're not gonna be the foremost expert on data. You're gonna have, oh, but I missed that shot. But anyway, we'll do the next one. I think it's important to create a circle of people that can be supported, because you're not alone. I really want to make sure the message is there for Latino content creators and allies of content creators that happen to be Latinx. It takes a village. Latinos are not a monolith. There's so many differences in our language, culture, backgrounds, and the way that we consume data. Whatever Adele likes, believe me, someone in Islos might not be the same type of, they might like his content, but maybe they will hone in on the specifics as Alejandro said on data. It might be the DNA of his story. So let's help each other out. One of the things that I always see is there's a lack of, let's say, vetting on the screenplays. Let's talk about that pipeline, because it's important. We receive, at least for NALIP, we receive hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of submissions of either submit your work or maybe they do it for our media market. Not all the screenplays and pilots and even the rough cuts are ready to go. By the way, I remember having this conversation with Adele because there were like a few years that he didn't get into the market. But guess what? When he finally got into the market, he had amazing meetings. So who's previewing, vetting, who's aggregating your data, who's actually analyzing if your actual content is good, meaning your screenplay. And you're like, well, my professor at NYU says it's good. Okay, can we get a reader from the blacklist to certify that it's good? Can we also get someone from the Nichols to actually, when you submit, let's get an aggregate score from all these different sources, and you're gonna get a better measurement of where your screenplay, your package, where your entire profile is being tracked at. So the agencies and the studios, they share a lot of these databases, and they try to see when was the last time that Del Morales submitted a screenplay for our television side of things. Did they submit to the writers program or to the directors program? They're tracking you too. They want to know where you're at. Have you made progress since the last draft of your screenplay? And some of this stuff is not really well covered in many different panels. So I'm glad that we did the impossible. Guys, panelists, are you with me? We covered so much. So here we go. And I know that Q&A is we're trying to answer all the questions as we go along. But why don't we do just last takeaways to be able to finish this? Vamos a cerrar con broche de oro. Let's finish up. What is your number one takeaway that you want the audience to have? Let's start with Adele, and then I'll work down the rest of the panelists. Adele, what is the number one takeaway from this panel that you want to leave for the audience watching?
The number one takeaway. I'm gonna piggyback on what you just said in terms of needing a team of people around you, folks that you can trust. You know, I've read a lot of scripts by people who it wasn't ready, and it's because they didn't share it with people who they trust. They shared it with their friend, they shared it with their mother. It's, hey, baby, it's beautiful. Nah, it's not really that good, right? So get a team of people that you can trust, who's when they tell you you need to tweak this, or and get 5 of them, right? And then If 5 of them tell you that these 3 things need work, fix those 3 things, right? But if each one of them is giving you something different, maybe it's good the way it is, right? I know that what you said about you got to get these stamps of approval, right? NYU stamped me. I thought I was good, but nah, I still need Sundance. I still need Tribeca. I'm gonna tell folks, screw the stamps, right? Do what you gotta do. Get the script that is tight as possible. Try to get money, try to get into these competitions, but still don't lose sight of the fact that this script is hot and you need to make it. Find that money. However you got, and like I said, it took me 17 years to get to a place. Now that's 26 shorts in 6 years. I did 26 shorts at NYU. So like I know that when I say, yo, read the script, that is close to being ready. You need to get to that place, and that's only through time, right? So that's my parting words.
Thank you, Adele. Alejandro.
Yeah, so I mean, I think and that's I like Adele's point, because at the end it's like, I think time is like something like you cannot really replace, right? For any project, you know, it really requires time. And actually, if we go back to what we do, like our data, at the end of the day, what it measures is like the amount of time that people put on any content, you know? So that's really what we're quantifying. And I think it's like, the whole point is like, you know, really time becomes like the variable that really is gonna allow you to first understand what is it that the audience cares, because if somebody cares about something, they're gonna spend their time doing that, right? So that gives you like an element of like, look, there's something here. And then also time from a perspective of a creator is like, you have to understand that to get to the point where you have a very tight screenplay or a very tight project, it really requires time. So like, I mean, it also, I mean, I think it's like, it's interesting because now I see a connection between those two, and it's like time from the audience, so that you know that the audience care about that, and then time that you need to spend on your project so that you actually deliver the best project that you can.
100%. And then Luisa, of course, bring us home.
Oh, well, for me, understand our audience. We need to understand our audience to build strong stories and also interact between the people that are doing the job effectively right now, and build the community. It's really important right now, because we could find people like Alejandro that give us, you know, new perspectives of what we need to do in order to be successful with our stories, being film or television. For both works the same. Audience
data, and then of course that passion. Never give up. Be resilient. Get it out there.
Absolutely.
Oh, so I'm here on behalf of NALIP. I just want to say thank you to LIFTT, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to have a great conversation. I mean, this could have gone for at least 3 hours, and I want to obviously give props to Melody and Tessa. They really put in a lot of work to put this together. I suggest you follow all groups. There's a lot of collectives out there. It's always good to unite. There's always your tribe. Find your tribe. Someone out there really wants to work with you, and make sure that together we're stronger. We will travel much farther. And I think we're going to achieve systemic change in this ecosystem if we all not only figure out a way to work together, but we share, again, one more time, data. And
all right. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.